Chapter 10 The Carnival Barker. Angelo Mosillo had long had a conflict attitude towards subprime lending. On the one hand, he looked down his nose and the likes in Ameriquets and the Ron Arnold, and didn't want to countrywide or himself to view in the same light. There is a very good, solid subprime business and there is fraudy business. He once told investors, it is very important that you understand the disciplines that Countrywide has. On the other hand, Mozilla called and beer to the sea Countrywide's market share eclipsed by the subprime companies, and market share remained his obsession. By the middle of 2003, he was a promising investor. The Countrywide will get our overall market share to the ultimate 30% by the 2006, and the time share of the mortgage market was a little over 10%. Mozilla would later frame the shares Countrywide facing the start times America changed the game. He said to a friend, if you had said nope, I'm not going to do this because it's not prudent. You will have to tell shareholder I'm shutting down to the company. The reality, however, was never that simple. Mozilla had created a company that had the desire to be not just big, good, but biggest and best embedded in its DNA. Taking a pass of a large segment in the business wasn't Countrywide style. And then on subprime to gain steam, Countrywide was increasingly driven by internal division. The way those conflict played on the might help influencing Countrywide's futures course every bit and the much America's unconscionable tears on for subprime lending. Angelo Mozilla wasn't remotely the hands-on manager. His frequent CNBC appearance would suggest this wasn't by choice. His was struggling was a variety of health issues. He had spinal cord problems so serious he had trouble walking at times. According to one person who knows him well, he had neck surgery, back surgery, and another elective, which went badly. The same person says another acquaintance who hasn't seen him for several years was shown when the next saw Mozilla. He looked like an old man, he says. David Lowe Countrywide and their founder wasn't around, either having retired president and chairman in the early. Loeb was in some ways the invisible founder, yet he had played a critical role in a Countrywide success. Access to a capital, the sale of loans, and the secondary market, the management on interest and credit rights. These were the important but low-profile aspect of the business. Lord Foxson, Lab's departure hadn't been entirely graceful. As he got older, his behavior became more erratic. In July 1999, for instance, the news broke that Lowe had sold 1 million shares of the Countrywide stock. High-ranking executives of publicly owned companies are never supposed to sell stock without first clearing this sale with the legal department and informing the rest of the management team and the board. Loeb had done neither. When one executive called to ask him why he had sold to the stock without telling anybody, Loeb just chuckled. After Loeb left, Mozilla seriously entertained the idea of the selling Countrywide. There were lots of potential suitors knocking at his door, and he hired Goldman Sachs to find the best fit. Although Countrywide came too close to selling to a big British bank and the Washington Mutual, both deals fell apart. Even without a sale, there were plenty of executives internally with the ambition and the skill to run the company. Country-wise, corrupt and executives had joined when the company was young and small, like Mozilla. Most of them lacked the Ivy League pedigree, but made up for it with a combination of business savvy, a fanatical work habit. Most of the time had the same sheet on their shoulder toward the financial establishment to the Mozilla had. That attitude was ingrained on the culture of the company and was a big part of the reason why Countrywide was always striving to outdo the big boys. Even after it had become one of the big boys for Countrywide top executives, that deep-seated need to prove themselves never completely went away. Speaking that served to max his depth, emotion, and strong will, he become the chief operating officer in the Countrywide, Homelands to the prime mortgage division that they always account for the bulk of the Countrywide business. 4 years later, Cortland became the division CEO and joined Countrywide board. He became president and chief operating officer on the parent company. To the employees, he was as much the boss of Mozilla. It was always. Angelo and Stan want to do this, recalls a former execute. Cortland was the one who took on the task that Lowe had always handled, making sure to the countrywide increasingly intricate plumbing worked perfectly. This was no small tax a company that was funding at $10 billion. World launch every month. He was the inside guy, the number guy, the operation guy, say former analyst in Pain Waiver analyst Gary Gordon wrote a reporting relating countrywide's wonderful discipline. That discipline was very much Cortland doing, and he took great pride in it. He did later tell people that while he was there was never a single user. He was right. Other mortgage originators occasionally had trouble with funding on the sale of their loans. Countrywide never did. Cortland also pushed Countrywide to the diversify. He wanted Countrywide to the big one and the most admired financial service providers in the country, not just a big mortgage maker. To that end, Countrywide bought a bank in 20 years because the bank was regulated for the office of the controller on the currency. This purchase on the bank also forced Mozilla to leave to the board another bank, a subprime lender called IndyMac. Based in Pasadena, IndyMac, which would be taken over by the FDIC during the financial crisis, had begun life a countrywide mortgage investment founded by the Mozilla and Lowe. This was a real estate investment trust and the rate that served as an outlet for countrywides to call jumbo loans was starting to compete with Countrywide despite the growing conflict. Mozilla stayed on the board, exercised stock option, and collect some of the company rich dividends. His son Mark began working there in 1996, and when Mozilla finally left the board after Countrywide bought a bank, it was because he had no choice. Also owned a bank. A bank regulation don't allow anyone to serve as director on the two bank holding company board. Taking the money and the Australians move and to some and Countrywide and sick that money was starting to matter too much to Mozilla and will take home 6.6 million in compensation, a number that will rise to a 10.1 million by there are CEOs companies that want the most important things is they made for the neatness guy. Say someone who knew him well. If Star Cortland was a shark countrywide, plumbing, a very different kind, and execute was in charge of producing out in lands. His name was David Sambol. He had joined Countrywide and become its head in land production, like Cortland Sambol had done to California State University Northridge, and had worked briefly as account for many years. The two men appeared to be friendly. They were both highly intelligent, men who cared deeply about Countrywide's standing and its market share goals. Bob Sambol, a former executive, says he blamed Countrywide, but their similarities ended. Sambol was a super aggressive salesman, very much in the Mozilla mode. Two had like Mozilla Sharon Warren. He did not always make a good first impression. His style was one of attack, said former executive. He will attack everything around him that didn't report to him. He will be relentless and very convincing until you challenge him with facts. But when you call him out, it never bothered him. It rolled right off his back and he was doing the next thing. Executive who has a fan symbol says he loved the details. He loved knowing the details and he loved putting people through to the ringer to see if they knew the details. People also made fun of the dictatorial nature. Other executives would pretend they were Sambol and say to each other, "You don't understand. You're not capable of the understanding. I see all the colors on the rainbow. Inside Countrywide, it was very apparent that Sambol was all about building his own kingdom. As a former executive Buddhist, he was dismissive of everything that he hadn't personally created. In why one former executive says that Sambol did care about risks. Above all, Sambol wanted to win. There was a clear mentality from his organization that these subprime guys are outcompeting us. We had got to do this. We just lost another land, recalls from executives. So after taking share on the sales force, Sambol made several changes aimed at putting Countrywide on a more even footing with its subprime competitor. The most important of this was to the compensation system. Instead of taking home a flat salary, loans officers will earn commission based on volume, according to the American banker. For Countrywide, the friction started to become a sickness when the Federal Reserve began to raise interest rates, normally rate increase, signal on this time for mortgage originator to pull back on land production. But in this new world, land production did not decline. Thus, like Cortland, who worried that higher rates brought risks on the default fell at talk, they were trying to hold back afloat. In lighter moments, they began to joke that they were becoming the CEOs. When Countrywide has first moved into subprime lending back in Cortland and Mozilla had both believed that the market was moving toward risk-based pricing, and the line between prime and the subprime were going to go away. And they convinced themselves that the Countrywide would establish standards that would keep the truly troubled borrowers away. while capturing to the more creditworthy subprime borrowers. Those who were just a step below prime initially, the company was very careful. Cortland used three roles for subprime lending and countrywide, according to the several form executives. First, all on the subprime loans had to be sold, by which he meant the entire thing, including the residuals that most subprime companies held on their books. Second, the borrower had to either make a 20% down payment and get mortgage insurance to cover the first 20% of the loan. Finally, Countrywide couldn't offer any subprime loan products that had a higher probability of default than an AFI and BA loan. This rule, however, seemed to the contrary to the company less and less as time went on, and whatever reservation Mozilla had about subprime lending seemed to fade the bigger the market got. Within a few years, making subprime loans, Countrywide could offer an astonishing different products, and the American banker accused Mozilla on the sounding like a carnival barker, and he lists some on them. We have REMs, 1 year REMs, 3 year, 5 year, 7 and 10 year. We have interested only loans, pay option loans, zero down programs, low or no down investor. That's it. Our intent to carry every product or program for which there is reasonable demand. If your customer can legitimately qualify for a loan anywhere else in the US, they will qualify on the Countrywide. In complaint, the SEC letter filed against Mozilla Symbol. Informed CFO Eric Ciarrocchi. The agency alleged that the Countrywide referred to this as a matching strategy. It's a competitor offered a loan product. Countrywide will match it. One thing differently, he will look at the model about how loans were supposed to perform and say, "I'm not going to believe them." We had meetings where I would say, "Are you sure you're comfortable with that?" says this person, and they will bring on the ones. And so the matching strategy came to mean to the Countrywide repeatedly loosened the guidelines for both the loans our sales force originated and the loans portion for other according to the SEC. Other subprime companies, for instance, adopt a loan strategy called risk layering, in which 2 or 3 different risks, no-talk, adjustable rate, credit impaired borrower, were grouped together in one loan. It was madness. Subprime was just really high rates for borrowers with bad credit, says Josh Rosner. That's different than the loan itself being a bad product. When you are the biggest, you have a responsibility to not give credibility to bad products. Whether you're Countrywide, Fannie, Freddie, or any and the big mortgage lender that were doing this, says a former Countrywide executive. Countrywide did just not the opposite. By the mimicking the products and competitors, no matter how dangerous it gave them imprimatur they didn't deserve. There was a final problem with the company's subprime guidelines. If a borrower couldn't meet the guidelines, Countrywide would try to make to the loan work anyway. This was not some rock effort by aggressive branch manager to sidestep to the rule. It was the rule. Countrywide called in the exception pricing system. Every lender had some version of this, But according to the SEC, countrywide liberally used its abstention policy for lands that didn't fit in the even to LawsNet guidelines. One former countrywide executive says the Mozilla told the Salesforce to list ensemble North Carolina is complained. John Murray, countrywide chief risk officer, wrote and the email to Sample. As a consequence, countrywide strategy to have a widest product line in the industry. We are clearly out on the frontier in the many areas. The frontier, Mary Murray, at that had high spec default rate of loss. Those in the industry could see the change even if Mozilla still refused to acknowledge it, says former industry executive. But to the outside world, the picture couldn't have seemed more glorious. By the end in 2004, countrywide have leaped in front of Wells Fargo to the nation's largest mortgage company. Take Cleveland, which had been hit hard by the first subprime bubble, and feared the consequence of the second bubble. The city council passed a law banning balance payment and mandating counseling for borrowers who were seeking certain loans. The law also required lenders to submit key information, including the total point and fees paid on each loan. In response to Ohio state legislature, which was controlled by the Republicans, passed it on Wismaker law, saying that only the state had the right to regulate lending. Mortgage lobbyists proudly acknowledged that they had legally written that stable that a group of lenders called the American Financial Service Association to Cleveland arguing that the city laws was not illegal. A court ruled in favor of the FFCA. In Cleveland law we overturned. ¡Ay, se me duerme la pata! The state that they wanted to do something about subprime lending didn't fare much better. In the following 2002, Georgia Governor Roy Barnett, a Democrat, signed into law the Georgia Fair Lending Act, which prohibited loans from to the being made without regard for the borrower's ability to repay. It also provides the securities the loans. Mozilla called the new law egregious. America said that they could no longer business in Georgia. A group of Atlanta lender filed a class action lawsuit. The rating agencies jumped in the side on the bankers, with FSB and Moody's both saying they would no longer rate, but backed by loans to the we originated in Georgia. In effect, what the institutions that were regulated for the OTS or the OCC were immune from to state or local laws. In theory, pension makes sense. A company always wants to be able to apply by one or several rules instead of having to adapt to 50 different laws in 50 different states. Federal prevention basically says the federal rules always take precedence and over state rules. But in this case, there was no meaningful federal rule. Neither of these federal agencies replaced the pretended state law with the comparable binding consumer protection regulation of their own. What's the message in send? It gave lenders a sense they had a protector in the government, said Francisco, who ran the Consumer Performance Division in Minnesota Attorney General Office until 2010. 1905. That had long been promoted by Alan Greenspan. His essential belief was that having multiple overlapping regulator was good for the system because, as he once put it in the testimony before the Senate Banking Committee, he once put it in the testimony before the Senate Banking. It served as a valuable restraint on any regulator conducting inflexible, excessively rigid policies. Yet we how the control on the currency took that idea a step further. Rather than sit back and wait for institution to come to the OCC, he actually took up to the advantage of being regulated by the agency he headed in the early. For instance, the OCC used a press release with the striking headline, "Controlled Gold Pension and Major Advantage on National Bank Charter." Just about a year after the OCC first began trumpeting to the virtues of the pension, and the OTS joined it, announcing that the drift of the oversaw were absent from the key provision in Georgia new law. The OTS had long observation when the state passed laws that it didn't think in drift shouldn't have to follow. But the OCC went all in, declaring that all institutions under its watch would be absent from all state and local laws aimed at predatory lending. After Wachovia moved and mortgage company into a federally chartered bank in order to take advantage of the OCC pension policy. And so it went New Jersey, which passed a predatory lending and law in the fall of repealed a year later after the lending community, along with the rating agencies, followed the Georgia playbook. In the New York, the OCC observation when the Attorney General Elliot Spicer simply tried to get data from national banks in order to see if they were complying with the fair lending laws. I think this reality is that the refusal to permit our inquiry in the assistance of the OCC in helping to the bank stop it was symptomatic and world where nobody wants to look at anything Spicer letter said. Finally, some prime loans continue to the way check into the national banking system, change to the securitization, and really didn't matter who originated them. The state had no way of counting on the important funding source, and the national regulator with their energy big focus on making sure that their institutions were free from pesky state law. It listed to by what not one of the regulator could see was the most obvious fact of all. If the city all over in the country feel they needed to enact their own laws. For the few who remember the old world mortgage and the concept of the right store were surreal days, David Sitting and the fashion mortgage banker with a homespun style runs the Arizona-based primary residential which made mortgage across to the country. Sitting started in the mortgage banking in 1988 when he was 18 and aside from a 1 year spent bagging groceries, he's never done anything else. He works out a world where making a loan was all about to the 4Cs: credit, collateral, capacity, and character. We choke on the loan like an airplane. As he watched the growing insanity, he says he went from the feeling scared to live at sea to thinking, what God am I? Have I just been following myself and I don't doing a job? Holy shit, maybe this guy are onto something. Maybe paying for a home has nothing to do with 2 4 CES. When they started in business, there were 3 loan products. The wholesaler was one of the largest organizations on the planet. Citiring, who is still a business, won't name the company other than to say, not around anymore. They flew into their headquarters because they wanted to talk to about him. Around a conference table sat a dozen men in suits. They'd say, that go, what's going on? Your company sell us to the lowest amount to approve loans and anyone he do business with. Citiring recalls. Because Citiring used the company software that could see that their system was approving loans and the Citiring was the rejecting and the headquarters. Oh, it's simple. Citiring told them, we seek the credit corporate and not make it true. That's why he flew you out. Once of the CEO respond, we don't like that. You need to trust our system, and if you do, your volume will go up by leaps and bounds. How do I know to the borrower will pay? You don't need to worry about that. They respond. The next day, Citiring says, he go to the trade tape for the subprime loans he was selling. Was showed the price various buyers were willing to buy. June had been a big month for him. Primary residential had underwritten 9 million of subprime loans. Usually the offer was close to the budget had been promising verbally, but this day thus the offer was surprisingly so. Sitting call on the guy he deal with. I say something is screwed up on the secondary market. He recalls. He said I'd been feeling too cold all day. It was a moment when the subprime market was tightening up. Almost all the bubble was coming to us and also to the moment didn't last very long. It was enough for Citiring. Dave, the man said, I'll let you get out. Excuse me? Citiring replied he took to himself. As just came from a meeting where people were telling me not to turn down lands. The man said, if you ever say it, I say this. I will deny it, but if you want your company to be around, you will not find another subprime land. There is going to be a bloodbath. And so, Citiring said he called emergency board meeting and they shut down in Haiti subprime business, even told her fin you spend buying some necessary software. All my friends in the business were loaning on their way to the bank. He says, over the next 2 years, he watched his business Paul make millions of buy private jets and mansions. He remembered thinking to himself, what the crap,